On February 8th, 2024, black hard-shell cases arrived at a cargo terminal near New York's JFK Airport. Inside were about 24 kilograms of cocaine, weighing more than 50 pounds. Federal agents were waiting. The man connected to the shipment was 65-year-old Brahmananda Prasad, a New York businessman who drove a Ferrari and owned a 5-acre estate on Long Island. Yet prosecutors believed the cocaine inside those cases represented only one trip in an operation that had lasted for years. Flight records would reveal 53 round trips between New York and California, and a federal judge would eventually hold Prasad responsible for 956 kilograms of cocaine. That was more than 1 ton. The strange part was where the investigation began. It did not start at an airport, inside a warehouse, or during a major police raid. It started inside a Delaware bar when someone overheard a man bragging about the cocaine business. That man was not Prasad, but his words would help expose everything Prasad had built. In October 2022, an unnamed person was inside a bar somewhere in New Castle County, Delaware. The public record does not identify the bar, the person who provided the tip, or the man who was heard talking. What is known is that the speaker described himself as a major cocaine trafficker. People make wild claims inside bars every night, and it would have been easy to dismiss the conversation as empty talk. Instead, the person who overheard it became concerned and contacted law enforcement. Delaware State Police received the information and shared it with Homeland Security investigations. The tip was limited, but it gave investigators a place to begin. They started examining men believed to be moving cocaine through Delaware and Maryland. Their attention eventually settled on an unnamed Maryland man who repeatedly traveled north into New Jersey. His trips followed a pattern. He would drive to a shopping center in East Windsor, remain there for only a short time, and then leave. There was nothing illegal about visiting a parking lot, but the repeated meetings made investigators curious. They began watching more closely, hoping to learn who the Maryland man was meeting and why the visits were always so brief. In June 2023, investigators followed the Maryland man and one of his associates as they traveled north in separate vehicles. When they reached the East Windsor shopping center, one of the men approached a parked Jeep. Brahmananda Prasad was sitting inside. Bags were exchanged during the short meeting, and the vehicles soon separated. Prasad headed north toward New York, while the Maryland men drove south. Delaware State Police waited until the suspected drug vehicle entered Delaware before making a traffic stop on Interstate 95. Officers searched the vehicle and discovered 8 kilograms of cocaine, weighing more than 17 pounds. The seizure gave investigators their first physical proof that the parking lot meetings involved large amounts of drugs. It also connected Prasad to a distribution network that reached Delaware. That connection mattered because Prasad lived in New York and obtained his cocaine in California. He did not have to personally sell drugs on a Wilmington street to face charges in Delaware. If he knowingly supplied people who moved cocaine into the state, federal prosecutors could pursue the case there. The seizure also changed how investigators viewed Prasad. They were no longer looking at an unknown man sitting in a Jeep. They now believed they had found a major supplier. The next question was how much cocaine he was moving when police were not present. Prasad presented himself as a successful businessman who had made money in many different ways. He claimed to have been involved with a jewelry store, a truck stop, a Manhattan hip-hop club, and a shipping company called Rishi's Pack and Ship. He also pointed to day trading and casino gambling, including poker and blackjack tournaments. His lifestyle seemed to support the image of a man who had taken risks and become wealthy. Prasad owned a gray 2014 Ferrari 458 Italia Spider that cost about $242,000 and could reach speeds close to 200 miles per hour. He also purchased an orange Dodge Challenger SRT Superstock for roughly $112,000. Investigators traced him to a 5-acre estate in Oyster Bay on Long Island, valued at around $2.5 million. The property included a swimming pool, library, wine cellar, and ice cream parlor. Court records also described family vacations to places such as St. Martin, Istanbul, and the Mexican Riviera. However, when prosecutors examined Prasad's finances, they found a different picture. Records show that he had lost money through gambling and day trading. Investigators also found little evidence that his other businesses produced enough lawful income to explain his property, vehicles, jewelry, travel, and cash. Rishi's Pack and Ship received special attention because prosecutors said it had almost no public presence and showed little sign of operating as a normal shipping company. They came to believe that the business name provided cover for the people collecting Prasad's cargo at the airport. The method prosecutors described was simple enough to repeat, but carefully designed to keep Prasad separated from the cocaine. He regularly flew from New York to Los Angeles, often using American Airlines. He carried black Pelican-style cases built to protect valuable equipment, and investigators believe those cases contained cash on the westbound journey. After landing in California, Prasad traveled toward the San Diego area, where prosecutors said he met suppliers in hotel rooms or warehouses. He usually paid around $12,000 for 1 kilogram of cocaine and normally obtained between 20 and 24 kilograms during the trip. On some occasions, prosecutors said he purchased close to 48 kilograms, which would weigh more than 100 pounds. Instead of checking the cocaine onto his own return flight, Prasad used the airport cargo system. The kilograms were packed inside the hard shell cases and delivered to Delta Cargo at Los Angeles International Airport. Prasad then returned to New York separately, while the cocaine traveled as commercial freight. Using cargo gave him another layer of distance. If he was questioned inside the passenger terminal, the cocaine was not physically beside him. When the cases reached JFK, other people collected them while presenting themselves as workers for Rishi's Pack and Ship. Court records described one regular helper as a relative. Another was Prasad's personal driver, who prosecutors said also sold cocaine. Prosecutors also said a Delta cargo worker helped monitor the shipments. After the cases were collected, Prasad sold kilograms to a limited group of wholesale buyers. He normally charged about $15,500 for each kilogram. Based on the government's figures, the difference between his purchase and sale price was roughly $3,500 before expenses, although Prasad later claimed that he earned closer to $500 per kilogram. His buyers then moved the cocaine into networks serving New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, and other parts of the East Coast. Several people appeared around Prasad as investigators studied the operation. Federal court papers identified Victor Simones as a California supplier and described Clyce Stewart as someone involved in coordinating parts of the trafficking activity. Prosecutors said Simones supplied Prasad with multi-kilogram amounts of cocaine on repeated occasions between October 2023 and January 2024. Stewart appeared in conversations involving cargo shipments and the division of cocaine. Other people remained unnamed or played smaller roles in the public case record, including the Maryland buyer, the relative collecting cases, the personal driver, the cargo employee, and additional wholesale customers. Prasad would later argue that he had never formally sat down with anyone and agreed to enter a cocaine conspiracy. Federal law does not require a signed agreement or a formal business meeting. An agreement can be shown through repeated actions when people knowingly work together toward the same illegal goal. In this case, the suppliers provided cocaine, Prasad paid for it, other people helped move the cargo, and wholesale customers purchased the kilograms. Investigators still needed evidence showing that the flights, phone calls, cargo shipments, and meetings belonged to the same operation. By late October 2023, they had gathered enough information to receive approval for a wiretap. For nearly 4 months, agents listened to calls and studied messages involving Prasad and the people around him. The investigation involved Homeland Security investigations, Delaware State Police, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and IRS criminal investigation. Each agency brought a different kind of experience to the case. Drug investigators watched vehicles and meetings. Financial agents studied Prasad's money and property, and shipping specialists examined the movement of cargo. HSY Special Agent Paul Lawrence II later signed an arrest affidavit describing major parts of the investigation. The wiretap allowed agents to compare private conversations with events they could observe. When a call suggested that a shipment was coming, they checked airline and cargo records. When people discussed a pickup, surveillance teams watched the airport. When Prasad met with the suspected buyer, investigators compared the timing with the arrival of the cases. No single phone call explained the entire operation, and a flight record by itself proved only that Prasad had traveled. The strength of the case came from the way the different records supported one another. Agents personally watched nearly a dozen coast-to-coast trips during the active investigation. When they searched earlier records, they found that Prasad had completed 53 round trips between New York and California from February 2021 through February 2024. Investigators did not physically watch every one of those earlier trips, so they had to rebuild the history using cargo weights, travel dates, communications, seized cocaine, and patterns from the trips they had observed. By early February 2024, investigators believed they had enough evidence to act. Prasad traveled to California again, while the wiretap remained active and surveillance teams followed the operation. The hard shell cases were loaded with about 24 kilograms of cocaine and sent to New York. Agents were ready when the shipment arrived on February 8th. Prasad was arrested after his return flight, and the cases were taken as evidence before they could move deeper into the distribution network. While in custody, Prasad spoke to investigators. According to court records, he admitted that he had been moving cocaine between California and New York since 2020. He also described earlier involvement in bulk marijuana trafficking. His statement suggested that the operation had started even earlier than the period prosecutors would later use to calculate his sentence. Agents searched Prasad's luxury apartment in Queens and seized $273,089 in cash. They also found expensive jewelry, 15 gold bars, more than a dozen luxury watches, and a loaded handgun. His defense later stressed that the firearm was not connected to the cocaine offense. The search changed the meaning of the wealth Prasad had displayed. Property that once supported his image as a successful businessman was now being examined as possible drug proceeds. The government identified his Ferrari, Dodge Challenger, real estate, cash, jewelry, and other property in its forfeiture efforts. On March 14, 2024, a federal grand jury in Delaware indicted Prasad and others. He was charged with conspiring to distribute at least 5 kilograms of cocaine. That amount carried a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years and a possible maximum of life in federal prison. The cocaine seized during the final shipment already exceeded the 5 kilograms named in the charge, but the government believed Prasad's true responsibility was far greater. Determining that amount would become the most important fight in the case. On September 10, 2025, Prasad pleaded guilty to the cocaine conspiracy. As part of his plea, he admitted that he had moved 117 kilograms during an 8-month period ending in February 2024. That alone represented more than 257 pounds of cocaine. The guilty plea settled the central question whether Prasad had knowingly taken part in the operation, but it did not settle how much cocaine should count against him at sentencing. Prosecutors argued that the admitted amount covered only the final months of a much longer trafficking history. They examined the 53 California trips, the weight of the cargo shipments, the transactions agents had observed, the wiretap evidence, the drugs that had been seized, and Prasad's own statements after his arrest. Their calculation reached 956 kilograms, or more than 2,107 pounds. Agents had not physically seized that full amount because most of the cocaine had already been distributed. The number represented the government's estimate of what the combined evidence showed Prasad had moved. Prosecutor Jennifer Welsh called the figure conservative because Prasad admitted trafficking as early as 2020, while the formal calculation mainly covered activity beginning in 2021. Prasad challenged the amount and continued pushing back against the idea that he had truly conspired with other people. At one hearing, he told the court, "I never conspired." Judge Mariela Noreika was not persuaded. His guilty plea had already established the conspiracy, and the evidence showed how suppliers, cargo helpers, and buyers worked together. After reviewing the records and hearing testimony, Judge Noreika accepted the government's calculation. Federal authorities said 956 kilograms was roughly 6 times the drug weight attributed to any other federal defendant prosecuted in Delaware in recent memory. Under the federal sentencing guidelines, Prasad's recommended punishment became life in prison. Before the judge decided his sentence, Prasad's lawyers asked the court to look beyond the cocaine and considered the person standing before it. At 65, he had no prior criminal history points. He had not been charged with shooting, stabbing, or physically attacking anyone, and his defense emphasized that the handgun found in his apartment was not tied to the drug operation. His attorneys also described years of personal loss. In a letter to the court, Prasad wrote about the death of his 26-year-old son, who was stabbed outside a Manhattan nightclub in 2010. He said the killing changed him and led him into drug use and a downward spiral. More grief followed when his sister, Vedwati Prasad, died from breast cancer, and his father died from complications related to colon cancer. On May 29, 2026, Judge Noreka sentenced Brahmananda Prasad to 275 months in federal prison, equal to 22 years and 11 months. The punishment was far below the life sentence requested by prosecutors, but for a 65-year-old man, it still carried the possibility that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The judge also ordered 5 years of supervised release if he completes the prison term. The financial consequences were also severe. The court entered a personal money judgment of $2,495,500, representing proceeds attributed to the crime. His wealth could be seized, but the years lost to prison could never be returned to him or his family.